A federal judge has ordered the release of the long-sealed Epstein archive, and it's unleashing millions of documents and videos to the public. As everyone begins to sift through the data, a familiar name keeps showing up, raising explosive new questions about who knew what and when. This isn't just a document dump, it's a ghost from a sordid past, haunting the present. For years, the secrets of Jeffrey Epstein's network of power, influence, and abuse were buried in sealed court records. Now, a torrent of information, totaling nearly 3.5 million pages, has been forced into the light. And at the center of this data storm, a name that's dominated headlines for a decade reappears: Donald Trump. So, the real question tonight isn't just what's in these files, but what it all actually means. What does this digital flood truly tell us about the powerful figures in Epstein's orbit, and specifically about the former and current President of the United States? The answers are tangled in legal jargon, political spin, and the very real trauma of countless victims. Tonight, we're going to cut through the noise. We'll follow the facts, look at the evidence, and piece together what's known, what's alleged, and what remains stubbornly, terrifyingly hidden. So, what just happened? How did a fortress of secrets guarded for years suddenly come tumbling down? The story starts not with one hammer blow, but with relentless pressure from journalists, activists, and most importantly, the survivors of Epstein's abuse. That pressure led to a rare moment of unity in Washington. On November 19, 2025, President Donald Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law. The bill flew through the House with a near-unanimous 427-1 vote and cleared the Senate without a single objection. It was a clear legislative demand for total disclosure, and in a remarkable political twist, the very law that would force these documents into the open was signed by the man whose name is now all over the controversy. After signing it, Trump took to social media declaring, "I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files." The law was born from a powerful public frustration, a feeling across the political spectrum that a cover-up was underway, and that the full scope of Epstein's crimes remained a dark secret. The law itself was simple, direct, and barely 3 pages long. But its mandate was powerful. It required the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to make every file related to Jeffrey Epstein's prosecution public in a searchable, downloadable format. This meant everything: FBI documents, records from Ghislaine Maxwell's case, flight logs, and critically, all internal DOJ communications about the case. The law was explicit. Nothing could be hidden due to embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. The only redactions allowed were to protect victims, classified information, or active investigations. The Department of Justice had a 30-day deadline, December 19, 2025, but that day came and went with only a partial release, sparking immediate bipartisan anger. With the DOJ under Trump's own administration seemingly dragging its feet, lawmakers and the public grew impatient. Finally, on January 30, 2026, the floodgates opened. The DOJ announced it had published a massive trove of material on a public website, justice.gov/Epstein. The scale of this release is hard to wrap your head around. The department made available nearly 3.5 million pages of documents combined with prior releases, over 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images. If you stack those pages, you'd have a paper tower taller than the Empire State Building. It's a digital archive of a criminal empire. But you have to understand, this wasn't the first crack in the wall. This latest release is just one part of a story that's been unfolding for years. The first major unsealing happened back in January 2024. In that case, Judge Loretta A. Preska ordered the release of almost 1,000 pages from a defamation lawsuit filed by survivor Virginia Giuffre against Ghislaine Maxwell. Those documents revealed the names of about 150 of Epstein's associates who had been hidden behind John and Jane Doe pseudonyms. It was in that 2024 release that the names of both Donald Trump and former President Bill Clinton officially became public in connection with the case, though no accusations of wrongdoing against them were in those specific files. That earlier release set the stage, putting these powerful names out there long before this new, massive data dump. This brings us to the question that's fueling headlines and online speculation. Where exactly does Donald Trump fit into all of this? The answer isn't a simple guilty or innocent. It's a mosaic of different pieces of information from different sources, and each piece carries a different weight. To get it right, we have to separate verified facts from unverified allegations. Let's start with the biggest release. The files published by the DOJ in 2026. Yes, Trump's name appears. But the context the DOJ provided is critical. In a press release that came with the documents, the Justice Department made a very unusual clarification. They said, quote, "Some of the documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election." The statement continued, "To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they have a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already." That is a remarkable statement. The government, while legally forced to release everything, is also fact-checking the information as it goes out. The law required the DOJ to publish all materials, including tips sent in by the public. The department is basically saying, "We have to release this, but we're telling you it's junk." This shows a central problem with this whole data dump: the risk of weaponized misinformation. Credible evidence is now sitting right alongside what the DOJ itself calls unfounded claims, and it's up to the press and the public to sort it all out. More recently, in early March 2026, another small batch of files was released. The DOJ claimed they were withheld by mistake. These documents contained FBI interview summaries from 2019 with a woman who accused both Trump and Epstein of sexual assault in the 1980s. While the allegations are graphic, journalists and the White House have pointed out major red flags. The White House called them completely non-credible. News reports noted that some basic details from the accuser, like locations, didn't seem to line up with Trump's known whereabouts at the time. It's unclear if the FBI ever found her story credible. Now, let's rewind to the earlier document release from January 2024. As mentioned, Trump's name was among the 150 people identified, but context is everything. In those files, Trump was named in depositions, but there were no direct accusations of illegal activity against him. For example, a witness, Johanna Schoberg, testified that while flying on Epstein's jet, Epstein mentioned stopping at one of Trump's casinos. Her testimony didn't place Trump on the plane or implicate him in anything. Being mentioned in a court document is completely different from being accused of a crime within it, a distinction that gets lost in the online chaos. And this all leads back to the profound political irony here. The law that forced this whole release was signed by Donald Trump himself. He'd campaigned on a pledge to release the files, a promise that was like catnip to supporters who believe a powerful cabal was involved in Epstein's crimes. Yet, at other times, he called the files a hoax. So was signing the bill a real commitment to transparency? A political gamble that the files would hurt his rivals more? Or was he just cornered by Congress? Now, his supporters can point to the DOJ's own statements debunking specific claims as proof he's the target of a smear campaign. His critics can point to his administration's initial foot-dragging and the fact that his name is connected to this story at all as evidence of something sinister. What is clear from the official record is that while Donald Trump's name does appear, no credible evidence has emerged from these official releases that implicates him in Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. The files paint a picture of a social acquaintance from a past era, but they do not, as of now, provide a link to the horrific crimes at the heart of this story. To really get what's going on, you have to look beyond the text on the page and into the gray areas, the redactions, the politics, and the legal games. From a legal point of view, releasing these files is a massive balancing act. On one side, you have the public's right to know. On the other, you have the need to protect victims' privacy and the reputations of people who might be mentioned for no good reason. The black bars you see all over these pages are where that balancing act happens. The law forbids redacting information just because it's embarrassing or politically sensitive. But that has sparked huge controversy. Lawmakers from both parties, like Republicans James Comer and Nancy Mace and Democrat Ro Khanna, have accused the Justice Department of botching the whole process. There's a deep frustration that the redactions seem haphazard, in some cases exposing victims, and in others, potentially shielding the powerful. This has created a lot of distrust. In March 2026, this frustration led to a bipartisan subpoena for Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify under oath, a clear signal that Congress is united in its demand for real accountability. From an investigator's perspective, the story is complicated by what isn't in the files. One of the most haunting questions comes from reports that bags of shredded documents were found at Epstein's jail facility after his death in 2019. The law specifically mandates the release of any information about the destruction of records. Yet the full story of those shredded papers is still a mystery. It's a detail that fuels public suspicion of a cover-up. It poses a simple, nagging question. If there was nothing to hide, why was anything destroyed? Finally, a political analyst sees this as a perfect case study of our modern weaponized information environment. For someone like Donald Trump, the release is both a problem and an opportunity. The problem is obvious. Any association with a monster like Epstein is toxic, but the opportunity is more subtle. By pointing to the DOJ's own statement that some claims against him are unfounded, his campaign can frame this as another deep state attack. He can play the victim of a politicized justice system, a story that plays very well with his base. The situation is a political Rorschach test, where one person sees exoneration, another sees a clever non-denial. It allows political operatives to cherry-pick whatever fits their narrative, leaving the public to navigate a minefield of fact, fiction, and spin. If we only focus on one name, even one as big as Donald Trump's, we miss the whole point. The true horror of the Epstein saga isn't about one person. It's about a global network of power, wealth, and influence that enabled these crimes for decades. The files, even with all the redactions, start to map out this dark world. When we zoom out, we see other high-profile figures. Former President Bill Clinton was also named in the 2024 document release, and newly released files from the DOJ included previously unseen photos of him. Like with Trump, the documents didn't accuse him of wrongdoing but confirmed his association with Epstein. Seeing powerful names from across the political spectrum makes it clear this isn't a partisan issue. It's an issue of an elite class that moves in the same circles. Other names under renewed scrutiny include Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former Prince Andrew, who was arrested in 2026 on suspicion of passing official documents to Epstein. The documents, the flight logs, the calendars, the emails, paint a chilling picture of how Epstein operated. His currency wasn't just money, it was access. He collected relationships with scientists, politicians, and CEOs. He gave them rides on his jet, stays at his mansions, and introductions to other powerful people. This wasn't just social climbing, it was building a shield. By surrounding himself with legitimacy, he made himself seem untouchable. Every famous face in his orbit, whether they knew it or not, added another layer to his armor. The reach of this network was so global and so depraved that it's now getting the attention of international bodies. In February 2026, experts from the United Nations declared that the Epstein files contain disturbing and credible evidence of systematic and large-scale sexual abuse, trafficking, and exploitation of women and girls. They argued the patterns of abuse were so severe they could potentially be considered crimes against humanity, including acts of sexual slavery and torture. This elevates the case beyond a series of crimes and reframes it as a potential global criminal enterprise. And this enterprise was allowed to flourish because of systemic failures at every level. It started with the sham plea deal Epstein got in Florida back in 2008. It continued for years as financial institutions allegedly looked the other way, and it ended with the catastrophic security failures at a federal jail that resulted in Epstein's 2019 death by suicide, robbing his victims of their day in court. The Epstein files aren't just an indictment of one man, they're an indictment of a system that repeatedly failed to stop him. In the middle of all the politics and online shouting matches, it's dangerously easy to forget the people at the very center of this story, the survivors. This entire push for transparency is rooted in their courage and their long fight for justice. It was a lawsuit from Virginia Jeffrey that pried the first records open. It was their tireless advocacy that passed the Transparency Act. They aren't a footnote to this story, they are its heart. And yet, for these same survivors, the release of the Epstein files has become a terrifying new ordeal. While transparency can lead to accountability, it has come at a great personal cost. The process has been deeply flawed, with botched redactions exposing sensitive personal information about the very people this was all meant to help. The consequences have been immediate and devastating. Survivors have reported that the DOJ's careless disclosure of their private information has led to a renewed trauma. Strangers armed with details from the document dump have started calling them, emailing them, and even threatening them. They have become victims all over again, this time by the very process that was supposed to bring them closure. This tragic outcome shows the profound responsibility that comes with transparency. It's not enough to just open the floodgates. Let's be clear about the crimes we're talking about. The UN experts used stark language: sexual slavery, reproductive violence, torture, and inhuman treatment. They described a backdrop of extreme misogyny and the commodification and dehumanization of women and girls. This is the reality that gets lost in the political noise. The core of the Epstein scandal is a story of profound human tragedy, of lives shattered by a predator and the powerful system that protected him. Any analysis that forgets this misses the point completely. As the dust begins to settle, the landscape is anything but clear. The official reactions have been a mix of defiance and defense. The Justice Department, under Attorney General Pam Bondi, insists it has done its job. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has publicly said he stands by their work. But when asked if new prosecutions will come from the files, his answers have been non-committal. Meanwhile, Trump's representatives have seized on the DOJ's own words, calling the dismissal of certain claims a complete vindication. On the other side, Congress remains deeply unsatisfied. California Congressman Ro Khanna, a sponsor of the transparency law, argues the DOJ is not truly following the law. The bipartisan subpoena for Bondi shows that Congress isn't letting this go. The release of these documents hasn't brought closure. Instead, it has lit up just how much we still don't know. A whole constellation of unanswered questions hangs over this affair. First, what was in the shredded documents? The idea of evidence being deliberately destroyed is perhaps the single biggest mystery. Second, who were Epstein's other accomplices? The sheer scale of the operation seems far too big for just Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Third, where did all the money go? The files show complex financial dealings, and following the money is often the key to uncovering a criminal enterprise. Fourth, will there be more releases? The fight for more documents seems destined to continue. What is still being withheld, and why? And finally, how does anyone navigate this infodemic? The DOJ itself admits the files are a mix of truth and lies. In an age of rampant misinformation, how can an ordinary citizen tell the difference? These are not small questions. They strike at the very heart of public trust in our institutions, our media, and our justice system. This story is evolving in real time. The files are a living archive, and uncovering the truth will take years. The official documents are public. You can see them for yourself on the Department of Justice website. We encourage you to look at the primary sources and demand context for every headline you see. Our team will continue to analyze these files and bring you updates grounded in fact. The unsealing of the Epstein archive hasn't given us a simple narrative. It has given us a complex, contradictory, and deeply disturbing puzzle. Donald Trump's name is in the files, but the context from the government itself suggests some of the most sensational claims are baseless, while other mentions are incidental. This isn't an exoneration, nor is it a conviction. It is a reflection of a murky world where social circles, political power, and criminal depravity all intersected. The true takeaway may not be about any single name. It's about a system of power that allowed a predator to thrive in plain sight. It's about the institutional failures that denied justice for so long, and the brave survivors whose fight for accountability forced these secrets into the light. The full picture is still emerging, one redacted page at a time. And while this is a crucial step toward transparency, the long road to true justice is far from over.